Hey everyone, Paul Wilson here for another eLearning live stream. Today is going to be a very interesting topic. I think there's a lot of people, in light of the things that have happened in the world in the last couple of years that have led maybe traditional teachers or people in other fields to start thinking about instructional design. And I've seen a lot of people on the blogs, whether it's specific to e-learning, which is what I do in particular, but also to many of the instructional design blogs, people in various industries who are talking about, transitioning over to instructional design. And there's been a lot of questions, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions around instructional design, what it is, how to get into it, what is the best path to take. And I'm going to give you some insight into this. Hopefully, it is useful to you. This will be about a 1 hour blog or 1 hour, not blog, 1 hour vlog, 1 hour webinar, whatever you want to call this. A little bit more casual than maybe some of the other webinars that you've attended. It's just a conversation about this particular topic. And I'm looking for participation from all of you. So you have the live chat. It should be available to everyone. I think I set it up to be available for everyone. And feel free to ask your questions. And I will give you my 2 cents. And it doesn't mean that what I'm saying is right for you. I'm just someone who's been in this industry for about 17 years now. Whew, that really shocked me when I did the math on that. I'd forgotten how long this has been. My journey is perhaps a little bit different than other people, as you can see by the gray hair right here. 17 years in this industry. I should look a lot younger, but the reality is that I came to training and development, instructional design, e-learning, all of that stuff. I came to it very later in life than most people do. So, but that's okay, because sometimes you need time to figure these things out. Sometimes you need to just, put the pieces of the puzzle together. And I'll start off today by giving you my backstory. So I did a number of things in school. I was particularly interested in computer science. I was particularly interested in art. I was particularly interested in photography. And I saw later in life, I saw instructional design as a really neat combination of some of those things. And I came to it quite by accident. I started off applying for a job, and it was called an instructional designer. The job title was actually designer developer. It didn't say instructional, but I didn't learn that phrase until I already had the job. But I saw the job posting. Now, I previously had been in retail, working in the electronics business. And I'd been everything from a salesperson to a call center agent to a store manager. And I saw this job posting and I was reading the job description. And I think that's probably the first thing anyone interested in instructional design should do is read that job description. My first best advice to you is make sure you know that job description, because that is going to be the blueprint for you getting that job and performing that job. And I learned that firsthand. So I read that job description, and for me, it was like a who's who about what I should be prepared to do in this job. So I was pretty excited by it because it literally was a whole bunch of things that I did in my previous job without some of the stuff I didn't like to do in my previous job. Suffice it to say, that looked pretty good to me. I was excited by the possibility of sitting in front of, at a desk every day in front of a computer, designing training courses, which is something I did. For example, when I was a retail store manager, I was responsible for training my staff. So I was in the training industry, I just didn't know it. I thought I was in the retail store management business, but I was responsible for making sure my staff knew how to use the product, of course, but also how to sell it to their customers. And of course, being a salesperson as well, I had to teach customers how to use the products and services that we were selling. So there was an educational component of that. My background really was more computer science, but I was able to apply some of that knowledge later on, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The truth is, I do not have a degree in anything. I am someone who was the subject matter expert because of that retail store manager experience. I applied for this first designer, developer, facilitator job because it was going to be teaching new store managers how to do many of the aspects of their job. So, for example, I was responsible for teaching them how to schedule your staff. I was responsible for teaching them how to read their profit and loss statement. I was responsible for teaching them how to make better decisions within their business so that they could minimize expenses and maximize profitability. And being that that was something that I did before, I was really more of a subject matter expert than I was a trainer. But when I applied for actually a first position, the first designer developer position, quite frankly, I didn't get the job. There was someone else with greater experience. And I ended up getting to know them because a few weeks later, the manager of that position called me up and said, "Paul, we're very interested. You're certainly passionate about training. You may not have the experience, but you are certainly passionate about training. And what we want to do is have you fulfill this job position, but for a 12-month contract. You see, we had someone who's going on a maternity leave, and we need to fill their position temporarily while they were away." So I was hired as an instructional designer. Again, I not really knew what that job was, but I was fortunate enough to get into the job and get my foot in the door. Now, I'm very thankful for that person who hired me. She knows who she is. I won't mention her name here, but the very first thing she did was she hired me along with some other people in the training department and sent us off to Langevin Learning. Now, Langevin Learning is apparently the largest train-the-trainer company worldwide. And they do training right in Toronto, which is where I worked. And I got to go to a couple of different courses from them. Let me just share my screen for a moment. And we'll just go to my desktop here, and I will just do a search for Langevin. So this is the folks. Now, this is not sponsored. They're not paying me any money to say anything about their products and services. But I was fortunate enough to let me sign into my account to go on a couple of different training sessions with them. So let's see here. Here's my workshops right there. So the very first course that I was sent on looks like it was Instructional Techniques for New Instructors. This is a great course. I learned how to teach to a bunch of adult learners, especially in a corporate situation. Now, part of my job was teaching in a classroom, and so this was a great course. I believe it was a 2-day, maybe a 3-day course from 2. Yeah, maybe it was a 3-day course, and we learned all the skills that we need. So for those of you who are thinking about going back to get your master's in education or something along those lines, this was a crash course in probably everything you would need to know to teach adults. Now, many of you are, you have a pedagogical background. And what I mean by that is pedagogical, of course, means teaching children. Andragogy or andragogical background would be teaching adults. And that's what this is teaching here. Shortly after, my company also sent me on instructional design for new designers. So again, this was the skills that you need to design training. So I was designing and delivering training with these two courses, and they were fantastic. A little bit later on, the following year, my company sent me to Advanced Instructional Techniques, 25 creative ways to add excitement to your training. This was a fun course. I strongly recommended it. And then as I started to get more advanced within the learning and development field and getting into more of a supervisory management position, my company sent me on training needs analysis, which is a great program as well. But my emphasis here is that my company probably spent, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000 on this sort of training here. And if you were determined enough and could scrap together or scrounge together enough, this would be a great way to get your feet wet, and certainly you could walk away with certain certification levels. I'm not there yet. There's actually a training and development diploma, which if I did an additional 13 days worth of training, I could qualify for. I did get my specialty certification. These are all nice to have. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about certification as we proceed here. But, I just want to show you that, I'm not just someone who's spouting off at the mouth. I've done the work. I've done the different training and so forth to get to where I'm at today. So the other thing that I benefited by was my colleagues as well. I learned a lot from them. I learned some things to do, and I learned some things not to do. I had a couple of great employees that were very influential in my career early on. Somewhere along that journey, I discovered eLearning. It was something that I really became passionate about. And of course, many of you know me for my Adobe Captivate tutorials on YouTube. This is a little different from that. This is about getting into the field of instructional design. And it could be for classroom training. It could be for online virtual stuff. It can be for a lot of different things. The interesting thing about this is that, I worked for that organization for almost a decade, actually. I think it was close to somewhere around, I want to say, I guess that would have been till about 2009, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe, well, actually, no, that's a lot less than a decade. I guess I worked there for about 4 or 5 years. And it was great, and it got my foot in the door. And once you become an instructional designer and you can put that on your resume, even if it is an entry-level position, you are an instructional designer. You don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, going back to school and getting the education that typically an instructional designer might do. So if you're partway through your career and you're unsatisfied with maybe the school board or the school system or teaching children, or maybe the pandemic has certainly reduced the number of jobs that are out there for you, by all means consider this path. But you don't have to mortgage your house, is what I'm saying. So consider that. Now, after that job concluded, what happened was I did do the 12 months for the person's maternity leave. They came back, and I was fully expected that I would have to step down from my position. But I guess I did something in those 12 months to impress my manager, because she found a way to bring me on full-time and permanent. So I was so pleased by that. I hope that the person that came back, who ultimately ended up deciding to leave again anyway, I hope she was never thought that I was targeting her or trying to take something away from her. I was very thankful for the position and the opportunity that my manager gave me there. I'm forever thankful, because it's given me my career today. Unfortunately, the organization that I worked for, obviously as a team of instructional designers and developers and facilitators, they started to look at us and think, can we be a little bit more lean? Can we be, a little bit more cost effective? So by, looking at our team, which was about 20 people, there was a large learning and development team, they decided to cut us in half. And unfortunately, by this point, because now I was a supervisor within that team, I was one of the higher paid individuals. And, sometimes being promoted is a good thing. Sometimes being promoted is not a good thing. And I quickly found out that in this case, it was not a good thing, because they realized they could probably hire 2 junior instructional designers for what they were paying me. So I was downsized, and found myself looking for my next job. Now, by this point, I had both feet firmly planted into the instructional design industry. I didn't see myself returning to retail. I didn't see myself returning to any of those other jobs that I had before. So I really wanted to try and find things out and find something within the ID space. Here's the thing, though. Because I didn't have that university degree, because I didn't have that diploma that says, hey, Paul is a great instructional designer, all I had was one manager. Actually, that manager changed hands a few times, so 2 or 3 managers who could vouch for me. I had nothing else, nothing official. No governing body was behind me saying, Paul Wilson is an instructional designer. So I went on a few of these job interviews and was asked by hiring managers, are you certified? At first, I didn't even know what that meant. Are you a certified instructional designer? I guess I could have said, yes, I've been to Langevin training, but I think what they were looking for was what at the time was called the Canadian Society of Training Development, with the CSTD, which is now called the Institute for Performance and Learning. That's what they're called today. They've changed their name. Let me just share my screen. That was the whole purpose of me typing this in. So the Institute for Performance and Learning at the time was called the Canadian Society of Training and Development. I could get that wrong, but it was CSTD. Very similar to the ATD in the United States. In the US, you have the ATD, sometimes just referred to as the TD, td.org. So that's the Association for Talent Development. In fact, the CSTD might even be Talent Development, Canadian Society of Talent Development or Training Development. I could have that wrong. Again, it's been a few years since they were called that. But, the thing about the ATD is that they offer certification, or in the Canadian version, the Institute for Performance and Learning, they offer certification. And this is what, interviewing managers were asking about. For me, in this case here, this organization, there are 2 different certifications. So the Certified Training and Development Professional, that's what I have, CTDP, or the Certified Training Practitioner, which would be maybe just a facilitator or something like that. This is someone who's really creating learning solutions. This is someone who's implementing learning solutions. Now, in the US, they have similar opportunities as well. So let's see if I can find the link for certification here. Let's see here. It's not quite so obvious on their site. So you can join the ATD just like you can join the I4PL. Let's see here. Maybe down here there's information about the certification. Anyway, they have very similar. Once you reach out to them, they can tell you more about their certification. They also do a series of conferences, just like the Canadian version does as well. And it's a great opportunity to go and learn. And if you even feel so inclined, you can, in fact, speak at their conferences. Now, I've not done any of their national conferences, but I've done a couple of their chapter conferences, webinars, things like that. I've certainly participated in the ATD Houston group, and I also did the ATD Florida. I don't know if it's broken down into different areas of Florida, but I definitely spoke at one of their sessions as well. So there's a ton of opportunities for you to get that certification. And again, this is a lot more affordable than going back to university and getting an education in a particular field of learning and development. And to that point, I want to say something too. I've seen a lot of people in the forums talking about, should I go back and get my master's degree in education? Will I be a better candidate for some of these instructional design jobs? Yes, everything you can put on your resume that distinguishes yourself from everybody else who might be applying for that can help for sure. But I can't tell you how many people who have these degrees and they're great foundations. They have these either their bachelor's degree or their master's degree. Some of them are even PhDs and very knowledgeable people for sure. But the practical skills that you might need as an e-learning designer developer like me, or just a designer developer, they may not be there. And that would be my concern. I've seen people take university level courses on e-learning, on how to design and develop e-learning, and they've never learned the skills themselves. They couldn't tell you how to actually build an e-learning course from a developmental perspective. Maybe from a design perspective, they can design amazing courses. But if you give them a piece of software designed to develop e-learning, they won't know how to use it. I'm not saying everybody, but some people, they won't know how to use it. And there's a lot of people in that category. And I think that's something that will help differentiate. Or if you want to learn a particular aspect of this industry, specifically e-learning, learning a particular authoring tool would be hugely beneficial. So in addition to that hiring manager saying, Paul, are you a certified instructional designer? I went back, I got my certification with the Canadian Society of what is it called now? Training development, or in the American counterpart case, the ATD certifications. You can say that confidently. Yes, I am 100% certified, and in fact, you can even log into the Canadian certification site here, the Institute for Performance and Learning, and you can look me up, and you can see Paul Wilson is a certified member of the Institute for Performance and Learning. And that goes a long way. You have to pay your yearly dues to maintain that certification. And, you have to maintain some training development on your own part. But the great part, I can't speak to the ATD, but the great part about the Institute for Performance and Learning is that they offer a series of webinars that are completely free to members. And that can count towards your certification maintenance as well. So I can maintain a lot of stuff by participating in the conferences that I participate in, and so on. Now, over the years, it's ironic because once I got that certification, as I would apply, mostly what I do now is freelance work, but as I would apply for contract positions or projects that would be people stopped asking me for that. I guess because it's on my resume now. It's certainly clearly labeled on my website that I'm a member of the Institute for Performance and Learning. So there's no issue there. But ironically, people stopped asking for that once I got it. So take that with a grain of salt. Obviously, if you're missing something and missing a piece of your resume, that might be something that a hiring manager is going to ask for. So definitely keep that in mind. So In fact, before I got my certification, it was one of those things that I felt maybe there's something I can do that's maybe a bit more affordable, because certification can be expensive too, just like going back to school. I actually looked into this. There was, at my local community college, there was a teaching and training adults certification. I didn't know that. Primarily, that course was for getting people, like, let's say you were experienced as an auto mechanic and you wanted to teach auto mechanics or auto shop at the local community college. Before they would let you have at it, they would require you to complete the teaching and training adults course. Yeah, TATA is what it was called. And, I'm sure many community colleges offer this. Now, you don't have to be a potential teacher at the college to take this course. Anyone can enroll in this. And if I remember correctly, this cost about 650 Canadian dollars, which would be like 500 US dollars. And it was a 6-week program. You would come once a week, I think Wednesday nights or something like that. And there were certain assignments due at different times. And seeing that I already had, half a decade of experience, I thought, I could do quite well. And I did. I ended up graduating from that program, got my nice little certificate. And it's recognized as a good alternative to what the Institute for Performance and Learning offers. So it's a great way to solve that problem, to show that you are able to teach and train adult learners, which is perfect for the corporate environment. The one thing I will say, and it's interesting, there's a lot of dogma in this industry. And I discovered more dogma in that course. And what I mean by dogma is that people in our industry, they latch onto things and they cling to them and they don't let them go, even when the evidence is against them. I'll give you an example. There's something in our industry called learning. What do they call it now? It's been a while since I've done this. What am I thinking of here? Well, I'll give you another example. One of the things that they taught was Edgar Dale's cone of experience. You may have seen this. It's a cone, or a pyramid, if you will, and it says that as we get down to a wider range here, it'll say that we remember, at the top, we remember what we read, maybe a little bit, but we learn more about what we hear, and that's the next layer. And quite often you'll see it suggested that, and it'll be written this way: we remember 10% of what we read. We remember 20% of what we hear. We remember 30% of what we see. We remember 50% of what we see and hear. And we remember 70% of what we say and 90% of what we say and do. It's a nice anecdote, but the reality is that Edgar Dale never broke it down into percentages like that. He did say that you remember more of what you say and do, but he never said 90%. So there's an example of how our industry has distorted the truth about, the cone of experience. Sometimes it's also called the cone of learning, which again, not true, not actually what's going on there. The other thing I was trying to think of, it finally came to me, is learning styles. Learning styles, and again, be aware of this. Learning styles are a belief that that people have one way that they predominantly learn. And therefore, as instructional designers, we should design as vast a variety of different learning activities to tap into all those different learning styles. So it's some people will go so far as to say that, if you're let's say a kinesthetic learner, for example. You learn by physically doing something. To suggest that any other method will be ineffective for you. And, that's because you are this particular learning style and can't learn other ways. This has been debunked. People are people. Generally speaking, we all are capable of learning different things similar to one another. We might have learning preferences, right? I love watching YouTube videos. I'll have a YouTube video on one monitor and I've got my software on another, and I'm following step by step here. That's how I love to learn. But learning styles have been debunked. Yet, you will go on to the forums and you will still hear people talking about learning styles and how crucial they are to design for and to. So, make sure you really do your research. And it's surprising that I was getting this from professors at the college teaching that teaching and training adults course. They would talk about again Edgar Dale's cone of experience and suggest that he had worked out those percentages, which are just not true. It's anecdotal at best. There's multiple intelligence. So Howard Gardner challenged traditional thinking, suggesting people. So again, do your research on this stuff. Howard Gardner, I think there's probably, similarly to how you determine your learning style, you can consider your own experiences, tasks, so I'm just reading some of my own notes from back in the day when I took this course. It's really important to, to consider that anything to do with multiple intelligences or learning styles, consider that more preference for your learners. And you know what? If you created a learning activity where a learner could choose to, let's say, read an article about something and then explain it to the class, or they could create their own poster about it, or maybe they write a song about, the ideas that they learned. Maybe do a YouTube video or something like that. Giving people choices is, I think, always a good thing. But don't by any means think that because this person is this way, that they can only do that thing. So again, I take these community college courses and some other sort, and quite frankly, it's a little frustrating because I'm not the university graduate. It's a little frustrating to see people who have PhDs still talking about this stuff. And you would think that one industry, learning and development, would have figured this out by now. But here's my advice. This is what I did. And in fact, if you go to my website, captivateteacher.com, which is primarily about learning the software Captivate, which is used for e-learning development. If you go way back to the beginning in 2010, and I apologize, it's not easy to do on my website, you can see me taking notes for this course because I decided to make it a very public thing. I started creating each week. I did a blog on what we learned that week in class. I thought it was a great way to, first of all, start to build my own website, but secondly, it's a great way for me to write my notes because then I can use them for something else. It forces me to be aware of them. People have commented on them. I've even made those corrections, like, for example, in the Edgar Dale piece, I wrote an article about that based on what I was taught in class. And then later I discovered that, what we were taught wasn't exactly correct. So I've got additional comments where I've said, correction. I've since learned that this isn't quite exactly what we were taught in class. So take that with a grain of salt. But what I did and what works for me may not be the same as you. Maybe you are the person that needs to go and take that master's degree and continue from there. But I want to assure you that there are options. You don't have to go into debt. You don't have to mortgage your house necessarily to get enough things under your belt to go after that job. Let's move away from the background, the education part. Let's talk about that job posting when you see it. So you're looking for that first job in instructional design. Obviously, you're not looking at the senior instructional design posts where someone needs to be in the industry for X number of years and requires all this vast experience. You might want to look at more entry-level positions because, again, you're just getting your foot in the door, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what I did. My first job, it was an entry-level position. In fact, it wasn't even a full-time job. It was a term position that I would have relinquished after 12 months had I not continued to work my butt off and make sure that I was deserving of that position. But what I want you to do is I want you, when you look at those job postings, don't just take your resume as it is and send it off. Read that job description because they will include it. Every job posting will have a list of responsibilities and so forth. And go back through your career. Think about times when you did XYZ, that as it's listed on that job posting. So, for example, if part of the requirement would be developing learning solutions to new products as they were launched, think about something that is either the same from your own career or similar enough that you can adapt the language to make it seem similar. Because quite frankly, when you submit your resume, you're going to be one of maybe hundreds of people submitting their resume for this job. There are some keywords and phrases in that job description that need to be in your resume. So I would say rewrite your resume for every single job post. Don't just keep sending off the same CV or whatever you want to call it for every single job. Rewrite it in such a way that it addresses everything in that job posting. Now, later on, and of course, here's the other thing too. Before you just say, I did this, I did that, I did this, don't write your resume like that. Talk about accomplishments. Everything in corporate learning, if that's where you want to take your, let's say your teacher's degree and apply it to instructional design within the corporate world, everything in corporate learning is about results, right? Because it's a corporation. They're not there for charity. They're not there for the betterment of everyone's knowledge. They are there to make money for their stockholders. And whether you work in learning and development or whether you're a frontline salesperson, that's the bottom line for that company. So we think in terms things like levels of evaluation when we're talking about training. What I need you to focus on when you write your resume, but also when you prepare for that first interview and subsequently second interviews, start to think about results. What results did you achieve for your organization that you worked for? And think about the levels of evaluation. Now, what we're talking about is levels of evaluation. It talks about, look up Donald Kirkpatrick. If you're not familiar with Kirkpatrick's level of evaluation, just do a Google search for that. And we'll talk about the levels. There are essentially 4 levels of evaluation. It's very simple to explain. Level 1 is the easiest evaluation to achieve. When you've gone to a class, you've probably been given a level 1 evaluation. At the end of the class, the instructor will hand out sometimes called smile sheets, but they're an evaluation on not only them as a facilitator, as an instructor, but the class itself. So you'll provide your feedback. It was lovely. The coffee was hot. The donuts were delicious. And the instructor explained things in a way that made it easy for me to understand. That's a level 1 evaluation. That is capturing how you feel about the training, your initial reaction to the training. Level 2 evaluations are at the end of that 1-day training course. You have to write a test. You have to get 80% to pass, and otherwise you'd have to come back and take the course again if you didn't pass. So those sorts of things are level 2 evaluations, where we're testing your ability to recall what you did. Nice, wonderful. Great for the learning management system and the corporation to keep track of employees who've done such and such a training and what sort of results. Um, you know, One Speed is asking, came late to the stream. Is this going to be posted as a video? Yes, you'll be able to watch the recording of this later. So level 2 evaluation, fantastic, wonderful. CEOs don't care about level 1 and level 2, right? Even learning and development managers might care about it a little bit more, but in the end, what matters to corporations who are hiring instructional designers are results. So look more at the level 3 and the level 4. Level 3 is when behavior has changed. Difficult to capture, but not impossible. So, for example, if we did, if I was given the task of designing a course that would improve sales in the organization in this particular percentage, obviously I'd write my learning objectives, create a course, build it out there, and the level 3 evaluation typically will be, 30 days later, 45 days later, and through observation, we go to see if the employees have changed their behavior. So if, for example, the goal was to, produce sales following the 8 steps of selling, through observation, with the help of the employee's manager, you could find out if they're performing these steps. So you've changed the behavior within the organization. That's a result. That's something that you can throw on the resume, that as a result of my training plan that I developed for sales at XYZ company, we changed the behavior of all the employees who went through this course, or 90% of the employees who went through this course. Try to be as accurate as possible. Include those numbers, include those percentages. Now, the best result, right, is level 4. Level 4 really comes down to actual results, dollars and cents. If you can attribute your training to $1 million savings in the company, man, hiring managers love to hear that kind of stuff. Difficult for maybe, let's say, an elementary or high school teacher to show, but if you can capture any kind of data like that, where even something as simple as you taught computer science in high school, and you can say that I graduated 40 employees who now work within the computer science space, and between all 40 of them, they earn like $3 billion a year. That's the kind of stuff people want to hear, because those are results that you can bank on. You don't want to say, I taught computer science. That by itself, so what? Hundreds of people, thousands of people have taught computer science. But what were your results? How effective were you? If this were my father, who was a computer science teacher, and he wanted to talk about his results, he could speak to the fact that, again, using that same example, you could even go so far as, hang on one sec. If you were my father, you'd bring this right there. That's my dad. So he wrote his own computer science book. That's an accomplishment, a result that not a lot of other people can say. So, and that was, the equivalent to state school board. In Canada, we have provinces, but that was the province of Ontario, used across the board and obviously around the world in many countries. So again, an accomplishment, something physically you can say, this has happened as a result of my teaching computer science. He was one of the first computer science teachers in secondary school or high school in Canada. So, definitely has some distinction there. And he was my favorite computer science teacher as well. But again, talk about those things that make you stand out. Don't spend time on, yes, I did this. Yes, I graduated. Who cares? None of that stuff is rubber meets the road kind of stuff. That's what you want to show, is the practical results of your accomplishments as a teacher, or other position. Again, when I got my position as an instructional designer, I talked about my retail management experience. But I didn't talk about how much I sold. I didn't talk about what company I worked for. I talked about the employees that I made a difference to. And I talked about, through my coaching and teaching, I have employees who doubled their income. I had employees who went on to become retail management themselves. I had employees who were successful in my organization. And again, through my teaching and coaching, went on to their own careers elsewhere in other companies where they're tremendously successful, because I taught them how to be better at what it was they were doing. And to me, that's far better than saying, yes, I was a retail manager and I was responsible for teaching my staff. Who cares? Again, focus on the big picture stuff, the things that made a difference in people's lives. And if you can find as many examples of those, I think that will be beneficial, especially during the interview process. One of the tasks that I would encourage you to do and prepare for, I don't have it within arm's reach, but I have a little white binder that I've prepared over the years. And I go back and look at it when I'm going after a new position or a new contract. This is every interview question I've ever anticipated and received, and what my answer is. So, and so often these are situational questions. Tell me about a time when you were given the task of developing some training and you didn't know how to begin. What did you do? Right? So when you get those kind of questions, work it out beforehand. Any organization that doesn't let you walk in with that binder where you could look up the answers to what those questions are, you don't want to work for them anyway. But, I always keep my little binder, and all my certificates are in there. Examples of my work are in there, at least the physical portfolio stuff. eLearning obviously is online. But I'm prepared for all of those questions, because I can come up with a simple, usually 3-sentence answer. I tell them about the situation. The situation was, I was given this, blah, blah, blah. And then I talk about the tasks sometimes. Some questions I don't use the tasks so much, but the task that needed to be done was this. Here are the actions I took, right? And the results. Always finish with the results. You can skip the tasks sometimes, but here's the acronym, STAR, STAR. You can lose the T and just call it SAR if you want. But if you think about every question you ask during that interview, or every question that's asked of you during that interview, and you answer it well, here's the situation. The task was, I had to do this, this, and this. The actions I took was this, this, and this. And the result was the company saved over $1 million per year. And then shut up. Let them either ask their next question or ask a follow-up question. But early on in my career, I didn't prepare. I just was arrogant, and I showed up for these interviews and I would say, blah, 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 and ramble, 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 ramble. And what should have been a 30-minute interview ended up taking over an hour. I don't know about you, but interviews are stressful enough. You want to get out of there as quickly as possible. So have a plan for addressing those. Don't be afraid to pause for a moment and think, let me think about that for a moment. Think about your answer, and then deliver it. Situation, tasks, actions that you took, and the results. star. That's all you got to remember. But write that down beforehand. Think about every single question you think a hiring manager will ask you. And of course, the more interviews you go on, the more ammunition you'll have. So you may not get that first job. You may go to many of these interviews and you won't anticipate certain questions. But when you're finished that interview, go out to your car, grab a notepad, write down those questions that stumped you, and then go home and think about those, because those questions are likely going to be very similar to, if not identical to, future questions you're going to be asked. And you can be prepared for those with a solid answer that emphasizes that not only did you do the work, because nobody cares about the work. I'll be honest with you. Nobody cares how many hours it took you to build that e-learning course. What they care about is, did that e-learning course solve a problem for your organization, right? And sometimes that isn't even an e-learning course. I have one situation in my history where I can think of where the ask was to create something in our organization we called a learning guide. A learning guide was a document that we produced in one of the organizations that I worked for when e-learning wasn't quite the solution, but it wasn't quite enough for a classroom session. So it was a self-paced document that learners would go through. The template alone was 15 pages long. So without any content added to this, the template for a learning guide was 15 pages long. I was given the task of producing training for the key and equipment sign-out room. Okay, this was an area within the organization where if you needed a key to a room, right, because we didn't all just have keys to every room in the building, you had to go sign out these keys. And certain pieces of equipment were, kind of fell into that category. So we had this room, the key and equipment sign-out room. Here's what the training really needed to be. There needed to be a simple document where you could see clearly what the steps were. You go to the key and equipment room when you need a key or a piece of equipment that normally would be locked up. You sign it out. So you put the date, the time, and your name, and what piece of equipment. Everything has an equipment key number. You put that key number in that column. And then when you return, you sign it out with the time and presumably the same day. And that's it. You don't need a 15-page document. In fact, what you need is a laminated piece of paper on the wall next to the key and equipment room, because quite frankly, the only time you need this training is when you're standing in front of the key and equipment room. So a little placard, think of it like when you pull into a parking spot in downtown part of your city, there's a parking sign. From this hour to this hour, you can park here. After this hour to this hour, there's no parking. And it might even go so far as to say, if you do park here outside of the range of time, you're going to get a $100 fine or something like that. That's a job aid, right? That's a one-pager, as they sometimes say in the industry, and it's positioned exactly where you need it, next to the parking spot. So that to me was a better solution. So there's an example where, if I was asked, tell me about a time when you didn't agree with management, that would be an example. I would tell that story. Say, here's the situation. I was asked to create a learning guide, which is 15 pages long. I looked at the tasks that needed to be done, and I looked at my own tasks that needed to be done. And the action I took was I went back to management and I said, look, this can be done with one page, and it should be posted on the wall next to the key and equipment room. The result was that management agreed with me, and I got to make an executive decision and put a single job aid next to the key and equipment room. And the result was that everyone knew exactly what they needed to do when they arrived at the key and equipment room. Perfect example of an interview question. Done, shut up, listen for the next question or follow-up questions, and go from there. So try to find those sorts of stories. Try to find those situations from your past. It may not be specifically related to designing e-learning or designing any kind of instructional material, but maybe there's something similar that you can tell in that place when you're being asked, of course, this sort of thing. So, but by all means, I mean, find your own path. I'm just giving you the possibilities that are here, but definitely prepare your little white binder, whatever it is, with those answers to all those questions. And I have probably about 30, maybe 40 questions. A typical interview, I might have no more than 10, I would say. So I don't use a lot of them. In fact, it's probably worthwhile to go back and look at them again. I don't do a lot of interviewing at this stage in my career. Mostly what happens is people reach out to me and simply hire me based on my reputation. So I don't really have to go through that process. But I do go through maybe more of a casual version of the interview where, I just talk. And the focus is that I want to talk about how effective the learning solution is that I have for you. And I always proceed from the assumption that someone is simply going to hire me. Don't assume that you're not going to get the job. Walk in with confidence, dress the part. I'm very casual here today, but if this were a real interview, I would probably put on a nicer shirt, maybe a long sleeve shirt, some nice dress slacks, and be appropriate for that position. It doesn't mean you have to wear a suit and tie, but certainly someone in the position of instructional designer would be smart business casual, I would say. So dress that part. You want to take it up a notch. Yeah, you might get someone a little bit more impressed because you wore a tie, but a tie's not going to get you that job. A tie might not having, showing up in, jeans with cuts in them and stuff like that might get you, not get you the job. But I don't think overdoing the business professional look is going to necessarily get your job. It's your work that you've done, but it's also, again, consider this: how you tell the story. Right? We talk in learning and development, storytelling techniques are huge in our industry. And I think it applies to the interview process as well. When you think about, doing that job interview, it's not unlike creating a learning solution to a challenge that you've been given. I always try to work in scenarios and storytelling techniques. I do the same thing in my interviews as well. So tell the story, make it interesting, make them sit on the edge of their seats, wondering how it finishes. And then, bam, guess what? We saved the company money. Or guess what? We lowered our attrition from 45% down to 25% because we properly trained new hire employees. Whatever it is, show the results. The results are everything. Don't just list your job duties from your previous jobs. Talk about your successes. Talk about the results. So let's take a moment. We're almost done here. Let's take a moment to just acknowledge everyone in the chat. I was hoping for more questions, but that's okay. I can see here that Rich joined us. I hope Rich is still with us here. Leslie's here. Luke Westwood, I know Luke well. Long time no see. I'm glad you could join us today, Luke. A little bit different live stream than usual, but I'm glad you could come on. Leslie, thank you for your support. Leslie is one of my members of my YouTube channel. That means that she supports me with, a monthly donation, for lack of a better word. And she gets access to additional content, early access to my videos, or free downloads, depending on the level that you join at. Leslie can take advantage of that. Rich, what do you mean by VAK? VAK. I don't know that acronym. VAC. I like it though. One Speed came late to the stream. I answered their question before. Anna, wow, Anna saying that's amazing. Hi, Paul from the Philippines. Shushita, hello, Paul. I'm enjoying this presentation. Thank you for all the tips. And Basanta from Argentina says hello as well. So we've been an hour. I hope you've benefited by this. It's more of me doing a little bit of storytelling, but I enjoy doing that. So I'm happy to share. If you want to see some of these entries, good and bad, from my CaptivateTeacher.com website, you can go back there and maybe I'll post on social media a link if you want to start at the very beginning of my blog and see when I was taking that teaching and training adults course at the local community college. That might be kind of interesting for people to look at. So you can see some ideas. But I really do, yeah, Philip is just saying here, hi, Paul, did you ever agree to take a task that you did not know how to accomplish at the beginning and learn how to do it on the way? 100%. And in fact, I can give you the best example. And I use this to this day. This was one of my managers that I worked for, someone named Susan, fantastic manager. I was given a document like it was a phone book thick, you know, and I had to train that. And I had no idea how to do that. And I went to my manager. I simply said, Susan, I have no idea how to train this without it being also a phone book. And she looked at it and she said, why don't you try a search and learn? What's a search and learn? So go through the document, find some key pieces of information, and create a series of tasks for your learners to find that information and present it back. Search and learn, right? We don't need them to memorize the phone book, right, of this source document. You know, teach them how to use the book. Don't teach them everything that's in the book. Teach them how to use the book. A good example of this, and this might have been it as well. I don't remember what that document was, but Workplace Hazardous Material Information System. It's a big fat book, and it contains, you know, all the information about hazardous materials that you might encounter in the workplace and what you should do if there is an emergency or an accident. You don't need to memorize all of those hazardous materials in the book. You do need to know how to read the book, how to look up these items, and how to respond to those items. So that's what you teach. Use the book as a reference and, you know, go from there. So suddenly I'm getting lots of questions. So we'll run a little long and try to answer these here. Anna wrote, I'm a fan of yours. I always use your tips in your tutorials. These are so helpful in my work. Thank you, Anna. Legal Aid Ontario Human Resources. Hi, Paul. This is Norani. I've been working as an IDEA for a few years, and I wanted to ask, do you advise getting certified through the I4PL? If you can afford it, because there's obviously a monetary cost behind it. I am a CTDP. What's my designation? I am certified with the Institute for Performance and Learning. I renew my membership every year, begrudgingly. It's kind of expensive, but it's a few $100 a year that I can spend. And every 3 years, I send in my log to update or perform my maintenance. So yes, I do, because again, there was a point when I was going for these jobs where persons would ask me, are you certified? Are you certified? Asked over and over again. I was saying earlier, ironically, people stopped asking once I was certified, but I do think there's value in it because it allows you to put something on your resume that says, not only do I think I'm awesome, but this organization over here, which is the governing body of your country. It doesn't have to be I4PL. It can be the ATD in the United States, and there are, I'm sure, other organizations around the world that are the governing body of learning and development, our profession. And if they say you're okay, that's okay for me. I think that's a great solution there. One Speed said, Paul, I'm looking forward to going back and watching the full video. I've been in ID for less than a year and your videos have become a go-to resource for me. Thanks for your effort you put in. Thank you, One Speed. So Legal Aid Ontario, a further follow-up to that, I already have a certificate from U of T in adult learning, but I'm not sure if that's enough. I would look at it and I would consider how practical it is. The one thing I have to say about the Institute for Performance and Learning, as well as the ATD, there's a lot of practical knowledge that can be gained through the certification. These are a series of competencies that they measure you against. And these competencies aren't theoretical things that you'll never use, like the stuff you might have learned in your education. These are practical skills that you can use as an instructional designer every day. There's things that I kind of knew because, again, I came to the certification after I'd already had 4 or 5 years experience as an instructional designer, but it created a foundation for me that I could work with. And, obviously I refer back to a lot of those competencies. The little bit of annoying thing is that every half a decade or so, a lot of these organizations will change those competencies. Not necessarily just to keep up with the times, but maybe to create a new reason for their existence, perhaps. So you need to kind of stay on top of that because obviously if the competency model changes, but I would say generally what I do today is pretty much the same as what I did 17 years ago when I started this journey. Some things have gotten easier, some things have been more streamlined, and like I said earlier, there's a lot of dogma in this industry that I can just take and throw in the garbage because it's of no value. The truth is, and I'll leave on this note, the truth is one of the things I learned from Langevin Learning, I was talking about them earlier in this session. One of the things that stands out in my mind, and it sticks with me every day, is this acronym PAF, or PAF, if you're, depending on which way you're looking at me. PAF, Presentation, Application, Feedback. That is learning, that's instructional design right there. That's it in a nutshell. You're going to teach someone something. That's the presentation. Get them to do it, right? Watching you do it doesn't help them. Learning a bunch of text doesn't help them. How do you apply it back on the job? How do you perform that job? How do you do that thing you're going to do? And then provide them some feedback. And then, if you break down this entire body of knowledge and skills that you need to train into PAF, little PAFs, 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 as you go along, how do I change a tire on a car? Well, the first thing you need to do is remove the lug nuts. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Then I'm going to get you to do that. And then I'm going to provide you feedback on how well you did. So you remove the lug nuts, you show them how to do it, then they do it. I could be doing this wrong. It doesn't matter. It's just an example. But get them to do it. And if they're doing something wrong, give them the feedback. No. Little stronger. Don't worry. You're not going to break the car. Feedback. Okay, now that we've removed the lug nuts, here's the next thing we need to do. We're going to raise the car up again so the tire's off the road and pull the tire off. I will do it, then you will do it, and I'll give you some feedback as we go. So these little PAFs as you go, and whether it's done with e-learning or whether it's done within an instructional class, because e-learning can give you feedback too. It's automated, but it still is feedback. There you go. There's instructional design. That was my favorite thing to learn because it was so simple. PAF, Presentation, Application, Feedback. There's instructional design in a nutshell. It's perfect. Okay, guys. So Anna, if you're talking about the ATD, I can't remember the acronyms, but like the Canadian version, there are 2 versions. So if you're just a facilitator, if you're teaching classes, if you're teaching material that other people have designed and given to you, there's I can't remember. There's a lesser certification, where you just need that skill. The higher skill is if you're an instructional designer. So if you're an instructional designer, go for that more complete certification, because that's going to give you more bang for your buck. It's almost like there's the senior certification and the junior. I forget the acronyms. I should remember those for next time I do a similar session like this. But here in Canada, you get your CTP, I think it is, and I have my Certified Training Development Practitioner. Certified training, so CTDP is my certification that I've got. So I recommend the higher, obviously, for obvious reasons. Guys, I got to sign off now, so we'll talk again. Look for the recording on my YouTube channel. You'll be able to watch it to your heart's content, and you can add comments if you have additional questions right there. So thanks again for joining, and have a great day.
If you thought this video was helpful, please like and share it with your colleagues. If you need help with Adobe Captivate, hire Paul for one-on-one instruction. Paul's goal is to focus on lessons based on your specific needs. Visit his website at captivateteacher.com. And don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel.